Florida. And we now know that his team is in full prep mode for the anticipated Senate impeachment trial in the new year. Good morning, everyone. I'm Amaryl Walker, in for Christy Paul.
I'm Victor Black. Well, good to be with you. The president had a volatile week in Washington. He did accept an invitation by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, though, to deliver the State of the Union address in February. Before arriving in Florida, the president narrowly avoided a government shutdown yesterday by signing a $1.4 trillion spending bill.
The package creates a new branch of the military, the Space Force.
We're covering this from all angles for you today. We've got Marshall Cohen in our D.C. bureau and White House reporter Sarah Westwood. She's traveling with the president and joins us now from West Palm Beach, Florida. Sarah, good morning to you. And of course, the president now starts his vacation, but the conversation still spilling out of Washington: impeachment.
That's right, Victor and Amara, and this is going to be something that the president and his staff are focusing on while he's here in West Palm Beach, because there are a lot of unanswered questions about what the president's trial defense will look like, both in who will be presenting the opening and closing arguments, who outside the White House might play a role on the president's defense team, for example, whether there is room on that team for some of the president's House conservative allies. White House officials tell CNN that there are some concerns that the duration of the president's time here in Mar-a-Lago could affect the Senate trial preparations, because while the president is at his West Palm Beach property, his friends, his informal advisors have an unusual amount of access to him. And so there are concerns among the president's team that perhaps they could persuade the president to go against what Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has convinced the president to acquiesce to. And that's a shorter trial with no live witnesses. The president, in private and in public, has previously advocated for a theatrical trial. He doesn't just want to be acquitted by the Senate. He wants to be vindicated. Now, meanwhile, White House officials will be joining him, including White House counsel Pat Cipollone and acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, for the second half of this trip to continue those Senate trial preparations. Yesterday on Capitol Hill, Pat Cipollone did a walkthrough looking for rooms perhaps to hold the trial in, as well as office space for the White House officials who will be camped out there for the duration of the trial. And yesterday, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi extended a formal invitation for the president to deliver the State of the Union address on February 4th, which means, Victor and Amara, that President Trump could be delivering the State of the Union address on Capitol Hill at the same time that he is being tried in the Senate.
And Sarah, thanks to the spending bill we just mentioned, there is a new branch of the military now. What do we know about the Space Force?
That's right. President Trump this week signing a massive defense spending bill that authorized the creation of the Space Force, something that the White House is touting as a historic step. It's the first new branch of service created since 1947. And take a listen to what CNN military analyst Cedric Layton said about the future of combat in outer space.
What they call a domain of warfare, and that means an area in which we're going to be moving troops. We're going to engage the enemy in space. The Chinese and the Russians have developed anti-satellite capabilities. We have to watch out for what they and other rivals are going to be doing in space.
Now, Air Force officials say as many as 15,000 personnel from the Air Force could be reassigned to the Space Force. So this is something that President Trump has loved talking about, this massive spending bill authorizing Pentagon funding through the next year, created Space Force.
Sarah Westwood for us there in West Palm Beach. Thank you.
Thank you. CNN reporter Marshall Cohen is in Washington this morning. And Marshall, what's the earliest date the impeachment trial could start in the Senate?
Well, if everything clicks, maybe we'll start seeing a trial first full week of January. But there are a lot of things that need to happen before we see that trial. Nancy Pelosi and the House Democrats still need to name the members of their caucus that will be the so-called managers to lead the prosecution in the Senate. They have to do that, and then they can officially transmit the articles of impeachment over to the Senate. But Nancy Pelosi has said she's not doing any of that until she gets a feel for what the rules are going to look like. And you mentioned earlier there is a bit of a dispute between Mitch McConnell, the top Republican, and Chuck Schumer, top Democrat. Democrats are pushing for some witnesses. They want to hear from key White House officials like John Bolton, who left earlier this year, and Mick Mulvaney, who is still at his post. But Mitch McConnell has held firm and said, we don't need to hear from anybody else. This is going to be a probably fast presentation. So they're at a bit of an impasse right now, but the next move should come from the House side, probably once we're back from the Christmas holiday break.
Hey, Marshall, these House managers, who's at the top of the list, potentially, to be named by Pelosi?
We've heard some names being floated around. It seems pretty clear that that group will probably be led by the same leaders during the inquiry, right? We're talking about the Judiciary Chairman, Jerry Nadler, the Intel Committee Chairman, Adam Schiff. But Speaker Pelosi has said that she wants a group of managers that represent the diversity of her caucus, you know, that not just folks from one side of the country or the coastal side. She wants to really get deep into her bench and represent the diverse group that she has to make the case against President Trump. It'll happen next year.
All right, Marshall Cohen for us in Washington. Thank you, Marshall.
All right, we are joined now by CNN legal analyst Ellie Honig, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. Ellie, good morning. Good to see you. Let's start with the basics. Apparently, there are questions over whether Trump has really been impeached over a technicality. We spoke with Jenna Ellis, who is the senior legal advisor to the 2020 Trump campaign and to the president, a few hours ago, and she said technically that President Trump has not yet been impeached because the Senate does not yet have the articles of impeachment. Here she is.
Either there is one additional step before the Senate has jurisdiction for that trial, and so it is fair and accurate to say that the president has not been impeached yet, or Nancy Pelosi is not actually transmitting the articles, and she should, and she's actually obstructing the Senate here.
Do you agree?
That's a ridiculous argument on a couple levels. First of all, it's only a matter of time before the House does formally deliver the articles over to the Senate. So if it gives the Republicans a talking point for a couple weeks, it's not going to last. Second of all, this whole idea comes from an article by law professor Noah Feldman. This is what happens when law professors get a little too clever. The Constitution is clear here. The Constitution gives the House the sole power to impeach, the Senate the sole power to try impeachments. There's nothing in there about any formal transmission. This is something that is made up. We all saw the House of Representatives. They voted. It was a majority. It was on TV. He is impeached. Now it's up to the Senate to go ahead and try the case.
Okay, so you said, yes, according to the Constitution, that the Senate has a sole power to try impeachments. Yet you have the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, who's holding up the articles of impeachment ostensibly because she says she wants to see what the Senate rules are going to be for the trial, although we know that there's a lot of concern about there being a fair trial. Is there anything that explicitly says that an impeachment trial has to be impartial or fair like a criminal trial?
No, I think it's implicit. I think you always want your trial to be fair as possible. I think what Speaker Pelosi is pushing for here is a trial with some substance. Let's have some evidence. Let's have some witnesses. That doesn't seem like a crazy idea. I think that's a good thing to push for. That said, this idea of I'm going to hold the articles and the Senate can't move until I transmit them, for the same reasons I said before, I don't think that holds water either. I don't think the Senate has to sit there and wait for some ceremonial messenger to come over and say, hear ye, here are the articles of impeachment. The Constitution gives the Senate sole power to try all impeachments. And so I think the Senate can and will proceed when they're ready. This is up to Mitch McConnell. I don't understand the strategic play by Nancy Pelosi here, but I do understand and think she's correct to push for a trial that has some substance and some impartiality.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about, what her strategy is here. It looks like a power play, obviously, to try to influence, Republican leaders in the Senate to agree to allow some of the witnesses that they want to hear from. So do you see this backfiring more than anything on the Democrats and Nancy Pelosi?
I see it ultimately just amounting to not much, because the Republicans are going to do one of two things. Either Mitch McConnell is going to say, you don't want to deliver your articles? Fine, keep them. You can have them forever. And then we can say that the system was short-circuited. And that's not what the Constitution expects. The Constitution says impeach, then try. Or McConnell can just say, look, we don't need to wait for you. We don't need your permission. The Constitution gives us sole power to try. Trial starts X date. You can deliver them or not, but we're going to start it, and good luck going to court and getting us to stop. The court will never do that.
Ellie Honig, appreciate you joining us.